The massive window of Space Station Echo 7 offered a perfect view of Earth's new defense system. Captain Jack Reed stood there with his hands behind his back, watching as the last warning beacon blinked to life. The small devices didn't look like much, just simple metal spheres with blinking red lights, but appearances could be misleading. Reed's blue eyes reflected the distant beacons as a small smile formed on his weathered face. After 20 years in Earth's defense force, he had seen humanity go from easy prey to a force that made other species think twice before causing trouble. The beacons were just the tip of the iceberg, a simple warning to those who might have bad ideas. "Captain, you might want to see this." Tom, one of the younger officers, called from his monitoring station. His voice had that nervous edge that made Reed turn around immediately. Reed walked over to Tom's screen, his boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. The station was quiet at this hour, with most of the crew sleeping. Only the night shift kept watch, making sure Earth's restricted space stayed safe. "What have you got?" Reed asked, leaning over Tom's shoulder to look at the display. The screen showed several red dots moving at the edge of their sensor range. "6 ships, sir. They're not broadcasting any ID codes, and they're moving in a pattern that matches known pirate tactics." Tom's fingers moved quickly over his keyboard, bringing up more data. "They're about 2 hours away from the first warning line." Reed nodded slowly. This wasn't the first time pirates had tested Earth's defenses, and it probably wouldn't be the last. Most of them turned back when they saw the warning beacons. The smart ones, anyway. "Have they scanned the beacons yet?" Reed asked, pulling up a chair to sit next to Tom. The young officer checked his readings and nodded. "Yes, sir. They've been running active scans for the past 10 minutes. But," Tom frowned, double-checking his data, "they don't seem very impressed. Their scan patterns are pretty basic, like they're not even trying to hide what they're doing." Reed let out a small chuckle. "They think we're bluffing." He stood up and walked to the center of the control room. "Alert status 2, people. Wake up Lieutenant Harris and get me a full sensor sweep of the approaching ships." The control room came alive with activity. Lights brightened, screens lit up, and the quiet hum of machinery grew louder as more systems powered up. Reed watched his crew work with pride. They were young, but they were well-trained and ready. "Sir," a voice called out from another station, "Lieutenant Harris is on her way. We've got detailed scans of the ships now." The officer, Bill, put the information up on the main screen. "They're Krell vessels, heavily modified. Looks like they've stripped off all the official markings." Reed studied the images. Krell ships were known for their advanced technology. Plasma weapons, energy shields, and quantum drives. 10 years ago, these pirates would have been a serious threat. Now, Reed almost felt sorry for them. "They're scanning the beacons again," Tom reported. "More thoroughly this time, but they're still missing everything important." He shook his head in disbelief. "It's like they think the beacons are just simple warning lights." The door slid open, and Lieutenant Kate Harris walked in, already fully dressed in her uniform despite having been asleep minutes ago. She took one look at the main screen and raised an eyebrow. "Pirates?" she asked, moving to stand next to Reed. "Krell pirates," Reed confirmed, about to make a very poor decision. Harris checked the tactical display. "Should we send them a warning message?" "The beacons will do that automatically when they get closer." Reed turned to face his crew. "For now, we wait. Let them think they've got us figured out. Let them think they're dealing with a young, inexperienced race that just likes putting up warning signs." The crew watched as the pirate ships moved closer, their arrogance clear in how they made no attempt to hide their approach. They had no idea they were flying straight into one of the most sophisticated defense systems ever created. "Sound general quarters," Reed ordered, "but keep our response teams on standby only. Let's not show our hand too early." He turned back to the main window, watching the distant ships approach. Sometimes the best trap is the one your enemy thinks they're too smart to fall for. The collector stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Night, watching the human warning beacons with 4 of his red eyes, while his other 2 monitored the tactical display. His gray scales shimmered under the dim bridge lights as he let out a sound that his crew recognized as laughter. "Humans," he said, shaking his large head. "They really think a few blinking lights will protect their space." His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. The bridge crew, all fellow Krell, shared his amusement. The Eternal Night was the biggest ship in his fleet of 6 vessels. They had raided 12 different species' territories in the past year alone, and none had been able to stop them. The Krell ships were covered in stolen technology, making them some of the most powerful pirate vessels in known space. "Boss," called out his sensor operator, "I've finished the deep scan of their warning beacons. They're even more primitive than we thought. Just basic metal and electronics. No weapons, no shields, nothing special at all." The collector moved closer to the front viewport. The Earth was still far away, just a blue dot in the distance, but he could already taste victory. Humans were known for their strange ways. They still used physical metals in their ships when most advanced races had switched to energy-based materials ages ago. "What do our files say about human defenses?" he asked his intelligence officer, who quickly pulled up the information. "They're a young race, only been in space for a few centuries," the officer reported. "They use lots of physical materials, simple energy weapons, and basic shields. Nothing that can stand up to our quantum phase cannons." The collector nodded, pleased. His ships carried weapons that could tear through normal matter like it was paper. Human defenses, based on physical materials, would be useless against them. This would be an easy raid. "Send the usual message to the crew," he ordered. "Standard raid protocol. We go in fast, hit their main stations, take what we want, and leave. No need to waste time with their primitive defenses." His communications officer sent the message while the rest of the bridge crew prepared for battle. They had done this so many times before that it felt routine. The collector watched as his other 5 ships moved into attack formation behind the Eternal Night. "Sir," called out his sensor operator again, "the beacons are trying to communicate with us." He pressed a button, and a simple message played through the bridge speakers. "Attention unauthorized vessels. You are approaching restricted Earth space. Turn back immediately. This is your first warning. Further advancement will be considered an act of aggression." The message repeated in several alien languages, including Krell. The collector's scales rippled with amusement again. The humans even used old-fashioned sound waves for their warnings instead of direct neural broadcasts like civilized species. "Send them our reply," he ordered. His communications officer pressed a single button, broadcasting the pirates' traditional response. Complete silence. Let the humans worry about what was coming. "Boss, look at this," his tactical officer called out. "Their station's power output just increased. They might be preparing some kind of defense." The collector moved to the tactical station, studying the readings. The human station was indeed using more power, but their sensors showed no weapons being charged, no shields being raised, just a slight increase in basic power use. "They probably just turned on their lights to see us better," the collector said, causing more laughter among his crew. "Maintain course. Show them how pointless their warnings are." He returned to his command position, feeling confident. His ships carried technology stolen from the most advanced races in known space. His weapons could pierce any physical shield. His sensors could detect any normal cloaking device. His crew was experienced in dealing with all kinds of defenses. "Time to first warning line?" he asked. 10 minutes, boss," his navigator answered. "Good. Prepare the quantum phase cannons. Once we're past their precious warning line, we'll show them what real space warfare looks like." The collector watched as they drew closer to the blinking beacons. In his long career of raiding, he had learned that the races that put up the most warning signs usually had the least ability to defend themselves. These humans, with their primitive technology and their flashing lights, would learn that lesson the hard way. What he didn't notice was that his advanced sensors were starting to show tiny gaps in their readings, gaps that grew larger with each passing minute. The first warning beacon flashed brighter as the pirate fleet crossed its line. Red light bathed the front of the eternal night, making the collector's gray scales look like they were covered in blood. His crew watched their screens carefully, but nothing happened except for another message playing through their speakers. Final warning. You have entered restricted Earth space. Any further advancement will be met with lethal force. Turn back now. The collector tapped his clawed fingers on his command chair. Lethal force, he said, his voice filled with mockery. They can barely build proper ships, maintain course and speed. On Station Echo 7, Captain Reed watched the pirates cross the line. He stood calmly while his crew tracked every move the aliens made. Lieutenant Harris worked at her station, her fingers moving quickly across her controls. They're not even trying to be careful, she said, shaking her head. Their shields are at minimum power, and their weapons are in standby mode. They think this is going to be easy. Reed nodded. That's exactly what we want them to think. How long until they reach the second line? 5 minutes at their current speed, Tom answered from his station. Should we power up the defense grid? Not yet, Reed said quietly. Let them get a little closer. Let them think they've got us figured out. Back on the eternal night, the collector was already planning how to spend his profits from the raid. Human technology might be primitive, but there were always buyers who collected artifacts from younger races. Plus, his crew could always use more slaves. Boss, his sensor operator called out suddenly. I'm getting some strange readings. There might be something wrong with our sensors. The collector turned his attention to the sensor display. The screen showed small patches of blank space, areas where their advanced sensors couldn't get any readings at all. It was like looking at a picture with tiny holes in it. Run a diagnostic, he ordered. Probably just interference from their primitive communication systems. His sensor operator tried to fix the problem, but the blank spots kept growing. They were small enough to ignore, but something about them bothered the collector. In all his years of raiding, he'd never seen anything quite like this. Second warning line in 2 minutes, his navigator announced. On Echo 7, Reed gave a slight smile as he watched the pirates struggle with their sensors. The quantum distortion field was working perfectly, creating tiny blind spots in the pirates' advanced scanning systems. The spots were too small to worry about, until it was too late. Power readings are increasing on their flagship, Bill reported. They're starting to take us seriously. Good, Reed said, but it won't help them. Lieutenant Harris, begin power-up sequence for defense platforms. Keep them in stealth mode for now. Deep in space around the station, hundreds of hidden platforms began to wake up. They stayed invisible, their systems barely running, just waiting for the right moment. The collector was starting to feel uneasy. The blank spots in his sensors were growing larger, and now his weapons officer reported strange power fluctuations in their quantum phase cannons. It's nothing, he told his nervous crew. Their primitive technology can't possibly affect our advanced systems. Prepare to fire as soon as we cross the second line. Show them what happens to youngsters who try to restrict Krell space. His crew obeyed, but they weren't as confident as before. Something felt wrong, but none of them could say exactly what it was. The second warning line was just ahead. The beacons marking it seemed to glow brighter, almost like they were eager for the pirates to cross. The collector straightened in his chair, trying to ignore the growing number of sensor blank spots. Weapons ready, his tactical officer reported. We can fire as soon as we cross the line. Excellent, the collector said. Let's show these humans what real power looks like. The fleet crossed the second line together, their weapons powering up, ready to unleash destruction. But in that moment, every sensor screen on every pirate ship went completely dark. And in the darkness of space around them, hundreds of defense platforms quietly opened their weapon ports. Darkness filled every screen on the Eternal Night's bridge. The collector's 6 eyes blinked rapidly as his crew tried to restore their sensors. Nothing worked. Their most advanced scanning systems, stolen from the galaxy's oldest races, showed nothing but empty black. "What's happening?" he demanded, his voice losing its usual confidence. "Get our sensors back online now." "I'm trying, boss," his sensor operator said, his claws clicking frantically on his controls. "But it's like space itself has gone dark." The collector turned to look out the front viewport with his own eyes. He could still see the stars, still see the distant blue dot of Earth. But their sensors couldn't detect anything, not even their own ships flying in formation with them. On Station Echo 7, Captain Reed watched the pirate fleet's confusion with cold satisfaction. He stood at the main tactical display, where his crew could still see everything perfectly. The pirates' ships glowed like bright targets on their screens. "All defense platforms report ready," Lieutenant Harris announced. "Grid is powered up and targeting solutions are locked." Reed nodded slowly. "Let's show them what those primitive warning beacons can really do. Activate the gravity web." The space around the pirate fleet suddenly felt heavy. The collector watched in horror as strange waves of distorted space rippled around his ships. The waves were visible to the naked eye, making the stars behind them bend and twist. "Full power to engines," he shouted. "Get us out of here." His engineer tried to comply, but the quantum drives that powered their ships began to whine in protest. The gravity waves were affecting them in ways their designers had never imagined possible. "Boss," his tactical officer shouted in panic. "Something's decloaking around us." All around the pirate fleet, hundreds of human defense platforms appeared out of nowhere. They were simple metal spheres, looking just as primitive as the warning beacons, but there was nothing primitive about what happened next. "Open fire," Reed commanded quietly. The defense platforms unleashed their gravity weapons. They didn't fire energy beams or physical projectiles. Instead, they created focused waves of gravitational force that ignored the pirates' energy shields completely. The collector watched in disbelief as his flagship's most advanced shields, capable of stopping plasma torpedoes and quantum beams, did absolutely nothing against the human weapons. The gravity waves passed through them like they weren't even there. "Impossible," he shouted as his ship shuddered. "Their technology is too primitive for this. They can't have gravity weapons." But they did. The humans hadn't wasted time trying to copy the advanced energy weapons other races used. Instead, they had developed something completely different, something that all those fancy energy shields were useless against. "Our hull is being crushed," the engineer reported in panic. "The gravity waves are too strong." Around the eternal night, the other pirate ships were facing the same problem. Their mighty shields flickered uselessly as the gravity weapons squeezed their hulls, not trying to destroy them, but simply holding them in place. On Echo 7, Reed's crew worked with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this, had designed their weapons specifically to counter the overconfident aliens who thought humanity was too young to be dangerous. "All targets are contained," Harris reported. "Their engines are disabled, and their weapon systems are crushed. Should we finish them?" Reed shook his head. "No, that's not the point of this lesson. Prepare boarding teams. I want prisoners to spread the word about what happens when you ignore humanity's warnings." The collector stared out his viewport at the defense platforms surrounding his fleet. Now he understood. The warning beacons hadn't just been warnings. They had been markers, showing exactly where the humans wanted their enemies to go. Every move his fleet had made had been predicted, planned for, and countered before they even started their raid. "Boss," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from the human station." The collector slowly sank into his command chair as Captain Reed's voice filled his bridge. "Attention pirate vessels. Welcome to restricted space. The Earth Defense Force will be boarding your ships shortly. Please don't do anything stupid. You've already made enough mistakes for one day." The boarding pods from Station Echo 7 approached the trapped pirate ships with careful precision. Inside the lead pod, Sergeant Mike Brown checked his simple-looking armor one last time. Like everything humans made, it looked basic on the outside but held surprises within. "Remember," he told his team, "these are Krell pirates. They're bigger than us, stronger than us, but right now they're scared. That makes them dangerous. Stay alert." His team nodded. Through the pod's window, they could see the eternal night held firmly in place by the gravity weapons. Its sleek hull, covered in stolen technology from a dozen advanced races, was now powerless against human ingenuity. On the station, Captain Reed watched the boarding operation through multiple camera feeds. Lieutenant Harris stood beside him, coordinating the teams. "First pod is docking now," she reported. "No resistance detected from their airlocks. The gravity crush must have damaged their security systems." The Collector heard the humans cutting through his ship's outer door. His crew looked to him for orders, but for the first time in his long career of piracy, he had none to give. Their weapons were crushed, their engines dead, and their shields useless. "Don't resist," he finally said, his voice heavy with defeat. "We've already seen what they can do to our technology. Let's not find out what else they've been hiding." The airlock door fell inward with a heavy clang. The pirates expected to see heavily armed troops charging in, but instead they watched as humans in simple gray armor walked calmly through the opening. Their weapons looked basic, just metal tubes with handles. But after what happened to their ships, no one wanted to test if that simplicity was real or just another trick. Sergeant Brown led his team onto the bridge, looking at the much larger Krell pirates with steady eyes. The aliens could have easily overpowered them physically, but none of them moved. They had learned their lesson about underestimating humans. "Your ship is now under Earth Defense Force control," Brown announced. "Any resistance will be met with the same gravity weapons that disabled your fleet. Understand?" The Collector stood from his command chair, towering over the human sergeant. But his usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a newfound respect and fear. "We understand," he said quietly. "We surrender." Back on Echo 7, Reed watched as more boarding teams secured the other pirate ships. Not a single shot had been fired. The pirates, who had raided dozens of worlds with their advanced technology, had been completely defeated by the humans' primitive defenses. "Sir," Harris called out, "you might want to see what the search teams found in their cargo holds." Reed walked to her station and looked at the images coming in. The pirate ships were full of stolen technology, weapons, shields, and drives taken from the most advanced races in known space. "Document everything," he ordered. "I want detailed scans of all their stolen tech, not to copy it, but to make sure our defenses can stop it." That was humanity's real strength. They didn't try to match the advanced race's technology for technology. Instead, they studied their enemies' weapons and found simple, effective ways to counter them. The Collector watched as human troops moved through his ship, their simple armor-hiding sensors that cataloged every piece of his stolen technology. He finally understood why Earth's restricted space was so dangerous. The humans hadn't filled it with powerful weapons. They had filled it with clever traps that turned their enemies' strength against them. "Prisoner transfer will begin in 10 minutes, Brown reported to the station. "No casualties, no resistance. They're completely cooperative." On the bridge of Echo 7, Reed allowed himself a small smile. The pirates would be imprisoned, their ships would be studied, and a message would spread through the galaxy. Earth's restricted space wasn't just a boundary. It was a carefully designed trap for anyone foolish enough to ignore humanity's warnings. "Send word to command," he told Harris. "Tell them the new defense grid worked perfectly. The pirates didn't just fall into our trap. They showed us exactly what kind of weapons we need to prepare for next." The gravity platforms continued their silent watch around the captured fleet, ready to remind anyone else who might think humanity's warnings were just empty threats. The holding cells on Station Echo 7 were just as simple-looking as everything else humans built. Plain metal walls, basic force fields, and minimal decoration. The collector sat in one of these cells, his large frame making the space feel even smaller than it was. Through the force field, he watched human guards walk past, their basic weapons and armor a constant reminder of how appearances could be deceiving. In the cell next to him, his tactical officer spoke softly. "Boss, I finally figured it out. Why their warning beacons looked so primitive. They weren't just warnings, they were scanning us the whole time." The collector turned his head slightly. "What do you mean?" "Every time we scanned them, they were scanning us back, but not with normal sensors. They were using gravity waves so subtle we couldn't detect them. By the time we crossed the second line, they knew everything about our ship's weaknesses." In the station's main laboratory, Captain Reed stood with a team of scientists as they examined the pirates' stolen technology. Every piece told a story of advanced races who relied too heavily on energy shields and complex weapons. "Look at this," one scientist said, pointing to a quantum phase cannon. "It's impressive technology, but it's all based on energy manipulation. They never considered someone might just use gravity itself as a weapon." Reed picked up a piece of the pirate's shield generator. It was beautiful, covered in glowing crystals and humming with power. And it was completely useless against humanity's simple gravity weapons. "They all make the same mistake," Reed said quietly. "They build bigger guns, stronger shields, more complex systems, and they forget that sometimes the simplest solution is the best one." The collector's engineer was brought to the lab under guard. The humans wanted him to explain how some of the stolen technology worked. What he saw there changed everything he thought he knew about humans. They weren't primitive at all. Their lab was full of advanced testing equipment, but it was all focused on one thing: finding weaknesses in alien technology. The humans didn't want to copy the advanced weapons. They wanted to learn how to beat them. "Your gravity weapons," the engineer said to Reed. "How long have you had them?" Reed looked at him with calm eyes. "Long enough to know they would work against your shields. Every time pirates or raiders came to test our borders, we learned more about their technology, and we built our defenses specifically to counter it." Back in the holding cells, the collector thought about all the races his fleet had raided. All of them had tried to stop him with the same kind of advanced technology he used. Only the humans had thought differently. A guard appeared at his cell. "Captain Reed wants to speak with you." They led the collector to a simple meeting room. Reed sat at a metal table, studying reports on a basic data pad. Nothing in the room looked advanced or impressive, and that was exactly what made it terrifying. "Do you know why we let pirates scan our warning beacons?" Reed asked without looking up. The collector's scales shifted uncomfortably. "To learn about our technology." "No." Reed finally looked at him. "We already know about your technology. We let you scan them because we wanted you to underestimate us. Every pirate fleet that comes here does the same thing. They see our simple technology and think we're easy targets." The collector realized the humans hadn't just beaten him. They had planned for his attack long before he ever entered their space. Every piece of primitive technology had been carefully designed to look harmless while hiding deadly capabilities. "Your ships will be stripped of their stolen technology," Reed continued, "not to use it, but to make sure our defenses can stop anything like it. Then you'll be sent back to your people with a message. Earth's restricted space isn't just protected, it's a trap. A trap we've spent years perfecting." The collector understood then that he hadn't just been defeated. He had been outsmarted long before the battle even began. The humans hadn't built their defenses to match advanced alien technology. They had built them to make that technology worthless. 2 weeks after their capture, the collector and his crew stood in their stripped-down flagship. The eternal night looked empty now, with all its stolen technology removed. Human engineers had left just enough systems working to let them reach the nearest Krell space station. Before their release, Captain Reed had one final message to deliver. He stood before the gathered pirates in the ship's main hold, his simple uniform and calm demeanor a stark contrast to their defeated expressions. "You're going home now," Reed said, his voice carrying easily through the quiet space. But first, let me tell you what's going to happen next. The collector watched the human captain carefully. In the past 2 weeks, he had learned more about humans than in all his years of studying their race. Each lesson had been humbling. When you return to Krell space, Reed continued, other pirates will ask you about Earth's defenses. They'll want to know if they could succeed where you failed. You're going to tell them exactly what happened here. Behind Reed, the main screen lit up with images from their failed raid. The pirates watched themselves fall into humanity's trap, their advanced technology useless against simple gravity weapons. You'll tell them how your quantum phase cannons couldn't fire through our gravity fields, how your energy shields meant nothing against weapons that ignore energy completely, how every piece of technology you stole from other races was beaten by basic human ingenuity. The collector's tactical officer spoke up quietly. They won't believe us. They'll think we're exaggerating to cover our failure. Reed smiled slightly. Some won't believe you. They'll come to test our defenses themselves, and we'll be ready for them too. Every pirate fleet that attacks us teaches us more about the weapons we might face. Every failed raid makes our defenses stronger. Through the ship's viewport, they could see the defense platforms still hovering in space, their simple appearance hiding their true power. The warning beacons blinked steadily, no longer seeming primitive to the pirates who now understood their real purpose. But that's not the most important message, Reed said, turning to face the collector directly. The real message is about humanity itself. We don't need the most advanced technology. We don't need the strongest weapons. What we need, what we have, is the ability to think differently. The collector nodded slowly. You let everyone think you're primitive. You encourage it, because it makes them underestimate you. Exactly. Reed gestured to the empty spaces where stolen technology had once been installed. All these advanced weapons you collected, every one of them was designed to overpower enemy defenses. But sometimes the best defense isn't about power at all. Sometimes it's about being clever. One of the younger pirates spoke up. Is that why you're letting us go? To spread the message? Partly, Reed admitted, but also to show that humans aren't just clever. We're merciful when we can be. You came to raid us, thinking we were weak. We proved we weren't. That's enough. The collector looked at his stripped-down ship, then back at Reed. You've done more than prove you're not weak. You've shown us that advancement doesn't always mean having the most complex technology. Sometimes it means having the wisdom to find a simpler solution. Reed nodded. Remember that when you tell others about us, Earth's restricted space isn't just a border. It's a reminder. A reminder that humans will always find a way to defend ourselves, no matter what weapons are used against us. As the pirates prepared to leave, Reed had one final thing to show them. On their main screen, he displayed a map of human space. The warning beacons they had ignored were just the outer edge. Behind them, spreading all the way to Earth, were layers upon layers of defenses they had never even detected. Safe journey, Reed said as he left their ship. And remember, the next time you see a primitive human warning beacon, think carefully about what might be hiding behind it. The eternal night departed slowly, its crew quieter and wiser than when they had arrived. As they passed the warning beacons on their way out, the collector watched the simple red lights blink. He knew that somewhere out there, hidden in the darkness of space, humanity's clever traps waited for the next group of raiders who thought that simple meant weak.